All right. Well, I wanted to welcome everybody to interview with Michael Watts today. For those of you who don't know Michael, Michael is a authority on all things guitar teaching. He has um, does Zoom classes. He also has published, I believe, several of your musical manuscripts for your albums as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, absolutely.
And Michael has also worked on the retail end
Hmm.
of acoustic guitars for a couple years. He was with the North American Guitar Company and is, at least in the boutique, our handmade acoustic circles, is known as a an expert and a resource. So Michael also, I should mention, has a podcast on the Fretboard Journal called Life on the Fretboard, where he interviews other guitar players. It's really excellent. If you haven't listened to it, I'd strongly suggest checking it out. Um, and what am I missing? Can you please explain mushy peas to me? That's always
I,
been a
I can
mystery.
explain my piece to you. That's probably best if I do that in person, though, Michael. In
Okay.
the
All
same way
right.
that, in the same way that you had to get through my utter disbelief as you explained grits to me in Memphis. So yeah, I think that was a fantastic sum up. Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that you said there that I think is certainly part of what I do here is as a resource, as a way to maybe help luthiers and players, collectors, and just anybody that genuinely loves, as I do, the luthier made guitar. I started as a player when I was 5 years old. I'm 46 now, so it's been a long old shift. But I think I'm just nearing halfway through it, and I'm really enjoying it. Um, I've been a professional musician since my late teens. I've worked as a session player, as a solo artist, all sorts of different things like that. And as Michael rightly said, I was at the leading edge of luthier-made guitar retail for 10 years, starting in 2008, with where I took over as manager of the Acoustic Music Company in Brighton, which at that time was the closest we had to dream guitars. And then subsequently, yeah, over the next 10 years, building up a client base under different brands with just incredible players, incredible collectors, and people whose time I really enjoyed. So I'm more than happy to share my own experience as a player, as a dealer, as a performer, recorder, recording artist, as someone who loves the guitar and occasionally needs to have it looked at or built from the ground up, or any of these things. I'm here for that.
All right. Well, again, I would encourage anybody just to chime in with
Yes.
questions either audibly or on the chat. But my first question for you, Michael, is you've owned a wide number and range of guitars over the years, and as you've said, you've needed to have them look at. Do you think that is there any kind of consensus of like, do guitarists only bring in guitars for repair when there's it's already hit a crisis stage, or do you advise people to, bring them in regularly for checkups like dental hygiene?
Well, yeah, that's just it, isn't it? It's like going to the doctor. I think a lot of people don't do it as a habit. I think some people do it when they first start to feel it tingling down the left arm or, buzzing in the right ear or something like that, and they go, oh, right, finally, here's a sign. Um, as far as I'm concerned, my acoustic guitars are a lot less temperamental than my electrics. So I tend to get my electrics set up um, every 6 months or so. And that's a small collection of Fenders, Trussarts, Gretsch, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Uh, so
So,
they tend to
I,
use us more.
yeah, just curious. Most people, well, I'll just speak for myself and
Hmm.
most people. would think that acoustic guitars would be more temperamental than electrics. What goes out on the electrics?
Well, more than anything, it's little choke points on the fingerboard itself, sprouting of fret ends. I mean, I live here on a fairly cold, wet island at the best of times, and especially tonight it's been freezing. And there are times when I can pick up certainly a telly or the Trisat's actually been pretty good, but my telly's a little bit temperamental. And I use fairly light gauge strings. I use nines as well, so there's not that much pull on the instrument itself. Sometimes it wants to uh, back bow a little bit, but I guess because the electrics are the ones that have a lighter setup. They're the ones that
Hmm.
tend to be a bit more variable. There's also the fact that the acoustics are built like tanks. I've got two concert guitars by Jason Costal with double sides. So mahogany on the outer side, ebony on the inner side for the one, and once again ebony on the inner side and maple on the outside for the other guitar. I'll show them later. We can have a show and tell. And they've also got a Spanish slipper heel Irvin Samoji style neck, so that's glued in. The whole thing is finished as one piece. There's a truss rod, but there's also carbon fiber rods running up the things on either side, and quite beefy necks as well. So the only real potential for movement is in the top itself.
Hmm.
Um, I'd say, because I certainly haven't noticed anything in terms of bowing or anything of the neck itself, because they're just pretty immobile. Um, and both guitars have worked very well indeed and continue to work very well indeed. I play almost exclusively in dadgad tuning, so my string tension is lower perhaps than other people, especially because I use elixir strings as well, so they tend to pull less. Um, and I also have a fairly light action, which means that I can get away with not so much a lower action, but I can get away with a slightly wider spectrum of attacks before I start to get some real buzzing or honking or anything like that. I did notice that the first time I really got it because here in the UK and around Europe, let's face it, the temperature and the humidity doesn't change that much within 24 hours. I remember going from Arizona to Texas, and I'd flown in from the UK like 48 hours previously with a perfectly set up guitar. Jason Costa looked at it again in Arizona, set it up beautifully, just fine tuning. I think at that point it needed a new nut because I'd worn through it. Yeah, it did. But it was still playing beautifully. And by the time we got to Texas, the sixth string was just like brrr, up against the frets, and it had happened to everybody. It's like Bruce Exo's guitars were doing the same thing. Just about every Luther. This is for the first BIG G. I think there's two G's in there. Event by Tom Bowersox out in Texas, and it was a real eye opener because as a dealer, I tell people that guitars made in North America are made to withstand the sort of climate changes that you'd expect, going from, let's say, Maui to Alaska through to New Mexico, and therefore you can expect them to be uh, incredibly sensitive instruments, but they'll take some punishment. And suddenly there was this whole sixth string just sitaring against the frets. I'd never experienced that before.
Yeah.
So
Well, living in Colorado, where it's quite high and dry, I definitely have humidity issues with a lot of my customers, which leads me to my next question. Uh, when you have your students or people that you advise, bring a guitar in for a setup, um, how do you suggest they communicate with the person doing the work?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm in a privileged position that the people who ask me, can you recommend somebody, almost universally have very, very special instruments. So your own work, that of Jason Costal, Irvin Samoji, Michael Greenfield, Jeff Traugott, Ken Parker, for instance. So when I get an email or a DM on Instagram or a WhatsApp message, it'll be about a guitar that's worth a considerable amount of money, and that's not the main thing about it, but it's a valuable instrument, and as such, it demands not only an elevated level of care in the same way that a 59, Flying V would, but it also demands an elevated level of expertise. So when it comes to recommendations, if someone has an instrument from a Samoji student, let's say, so Ray Kraut, Michi Matsuda, Mario Beauregard, whoever it happens to be, I would recommend that they get their guitar set up or repaired by somebody who with an intimate knowledge of what's going on there. Because if you bring that to someone uh, whose primary area of expertise is, let's say, 1920s Martins, now they function in a very different way. You've got the double sides, you've got the, in some cases, almost paper thin top and back, vibrating as two plates, and then the hybrid lattice bracing as well. So I guess it's kind of you need to find somebody that's got the experience, but then absolutely right, you do have to communicate your own needs, and that is something that I've helped people with. Granted, yeah, during the repair or the setup process, but even more specifically during the point where we're sitting down and actually specing out the instrument to begin with, before the build even starts. Um, I was asked recently. I had a lovely day out in Newark. Um, Newark in the UK, not Newark in in the US, which I'm sure is also gorgeous. But it
No, it's not.
It is not. Can't confirm.
Can
Can't
confirm. Yeah, I've flown into it
cannot
once.
confirm.
That's
No.
all I've seen. Um, but there's a guitar school in Newark in the UK, and I was invited to play the instruments of the graduating class. So these are guys that have been making guitars for 3 years. They'd gone through COVID. They'd done this masked up, and they had instruments to show for it at the end of it. It was really, really quite moving, in fact, to talk to them, to see just how fucking resilient they had been, was just incredible. And prior to a concert with these instruments, um, I was asked to give some sort of workshop, a chat, about this sort of thing. And I had their guitars with me. I brought my own guitar as well, my main concert instrument, and I showed it to them because I wanted them to see it as something tangible, as a reality that they had experienced with their own fingertips, rather than something that only existed on the internet. And one of them asked a very good question. He asked, given your background, what is it that you're not prepared to compromise on in the creation of a custom guitar? And I had to think about that. It genuinely put me on the back foot for a moment. And quite honestly, I think the only thing that I'm not prepared to compromise on is communication between myself and whoever is making the instrument. Shit happens. Sides get snapped. You'll discover a sap pocket in what was a perfect piece of spruce, or any number of things can happen. You tip a jar of fish glue through the sound hole just when it's been buffed. Horrific events have been catalogued on various forums. But it's all solvable with open and honest communication. And I don't like the feeling that uh, for some reason there is that's not happening. you know, and it may be through it could be through a language barrier because let's face it, we've got an international community now. We've got people ordering in one language and people making the guitar in another. So there's that to watch out for. It could be through insecurity on either part. You know, I'm very vocal about the idea that if I'm working with a luthier to produce a an instrument and I that I will be playing, and I do see it as a full collaboration. Um, there are certain aspects of which they get complete carte blanche. It's a blank canvas, and I trust them to just go for it. And that's something that could lead to all sorts of pitfalls if you don't know someone's work or they don't understand your own requirements. Now, once again, I'm in the privileged position of working with luthiers who know my work very well indeed. They know me as a player. I've demonstrated their guitars for them in concerts, on YouTube, all that sort of thing. And we've been friends for, in some cases, well over a decade. So it all comes down to that communication, and it doesn't matter what needs doing, even if it's just a restring or your nut has somehow come unglued. You need to have the confidence that whoever is doing the job understands what your requirements are. I would suggest. I don't
No, I
know.
think it's a good point. I mean, I think I mean, especially in repairs where, sometimes unforeseen things can arise,
Right.
and but also just after the repair is done, guitars move, and the setups may not hold. They may not be need to be readjusted again. But one thing that I'd say we, as people who work on guitars, uh, almost often always jokingly complain about is the request for I want the lowest action and I don't want it to buzz at all.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there is that, and I've jokingly said that to people in the past. Well, yeah, as low as possible without buzzing. Beautiful, great. I've set up guitars for people who ask me for that. I mean that I have set up instruments in the past. I'm not a repairman. I'm not a guitarist, but in times of darkness, I have cut my own nut. I have made my own
Do you
saddle.
know that when Deep
And
Throat
so I've got my fingers a little bit powdery with rather than actual sawdust shavings. Yeah, that's a bitch, isn't it? And there's also the fact that okay, we're on a closed forum. A lot of these difficulties, these challenges that are being brought to you, may have their root cause in poor technique.
I think 100% of the time.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
110%.
seeing as nobody came from the future to stop me saying that, I
Mhm.
guess it's okay. I've seen some horror stories. I'm sure you all have too. A dude with like a solid lead thumb, just like boom. Look, it buzzes when I do this. Look, you know, I can't I can't do this without it buzzing. It sounded,
Mhm.
you're like, fuck. Well, yeah, obviously, to put it down, it'll stop screaming. And that's just as true of the left hand as it is of the right. Poor technique with the fingering, the fingers in the wrong place, a gauge that doesn't suit the player, a repertoire that doesn't suit the player, right hand technique. It can all add up to a functioning instrument for 99% of the population being utterly wrong for the one dude that's brought it in for you to work your miracles. And then, then there's another kind of communication that needs to take place.
Yeah. So, how do you suggest for the repair person when a client's picking up a guitar and they're going, see when I try and make it buzz, it buzzes.
Hmm.
How do they essentially tell them that it's it's their technique, it's not the guitar?
Well, there are brutal ways to do it. It depends how keen you are on making any money. You want repeat business. You want repeat clients. Ideally, I imagine. I've always found that in as far as any sort of communication goes, it's nice to get people talking about what really matters to them. And in this case, they brought an instrument to you that matters to them for what reason? Because they want to make a record with it, or they want to gig with it, or they just want to play it at home. This instrument is a refuge, it's a connector between them and a state of mind that they find pleasant, that they find soothing, healing, so we have to respect that. How do we get there, though? Yeah, there may be options where, in the case of a really heavy-handed player, scale length might be an issue. If you get a tighter scale length, maybe that helps. Go get a heavier string gauge, bump up the action, um, and it's really a question of asking questions. Because very often, if you ask the right question, the answer will come to your client and they'll get there. It's not so much manipulation, but they'll get there on their own and go, actually, hang on a second, I've just realized in talking to you that I've been doing this wrong all this time. It doesn't always work that way. I wish it was always that simple. I wish you could gently talk to someone and go, dude, you are hammering this Jaguar. Have you ever thought of a Jazzmaster? And then the next day, the clouds part and the world is perfect for them again. I I remember a particular client that I used to have as a dealer who had just the weirdest relationship with the process of commissioning a guitar, first of all, and then the instrument itself. So to begin with, they would order a guitar, and it would be it was almost religious the way that they adored this thing. They worshipped every single tiny icon that they got of showing the back and the sides, and there's the top with all the go bars on and all this sort of stuff. And then within 2 months of it arriving, they flipped it because it existed and they didn't want that and they thought they did. But now look, I've got this being built by someone else. And I told this person 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, what would suit them. And this isn't a story about me being right. I don't actually have that many of those. But lo and behold, over a decade later, um, I was told, because I've gotten blocked on WhatsApp because I just can't face the fucking conversation, to be honest, but I was told that they had acquired exactly what I had suggested and were thrilled with it. And I thought, well, isn't that lovely? So it's always communication, it's conversation. You're finding out, tell me what this guitar means to you. Tell me what you're doing with this guitar that you find yourself unable to do now. It could be that, say, I'm recording a record of weird ass tunings, and I brought you for want of an example, how about a pre-war Martin OM? The holy grail of things. But because of my weird ass tuning and the fact that the guitar wasn't designed for that, I'm noticing intonation issues because I'm using strange strings and all that sort of thing. Well, at that point, you have to explain gently that this is all going to be about compromise and that you're happy to use your expertise and guidance in order to get this person as close as they can, but there are going to have to be other adjustments. If you're in low tunings, you have to adjust your right hand attack, or forgive me if they're left-handed, you have to adjust the attack of each note. Because otherwise, if you hit a string that's in C with the same vigor and youthful dynamism as you would one that's in E, that thing's going to flap around all over the place. Anyway, I mean, you know this as well as I do, but it's all about, I guess, the communication that will reveal what really matters to that person and where there is scope for compromise and where there is scope for guidance. Because let's face it, when you go to a tech or a luthier, much the same way when you go to a doctor, there's a diagnostic process, isn't it? You're coming with a problem and you're like, look, it hurts when I do this. And then you're reliant upon someone. It's quite a vulnerable state to be in sometimes, especially if you're a beginner and let's say you're asking for your first string change because one snapped. You know, the strings have been on there for like 6 years, but one's finally gone. And you don't know what the hell you're doing. It's a vulnerable thing because a lot of the guitar experience presupposes knowledge, it presupposes experience, and it presupposes an element of nonchalant care. You know, every bit of, especially with the electric guitar, every bit of it's entirely considered, from your choice of strap through to what strings the instrument's wearing, through to what you plug it into. And if you reveal to somebody that there's an insecurity, that there's a chink in your armor, it feels awful. It's like, oh yeah, I can play it, but I can't restring it. You know, ooh,
All right.
I don't know.
So you had so this is a group of mostly professionals who work on guitars, repair and build,
Thank you.
and
Willing.
we kind of have our jokes about players and things that we bitch about.
Mm,
Um,
tell me
you
all
know,
of it.
well, uh, but I'm curious. Maybe you're on the other side more, being on players forums and
Mm.
people more talking about their guitars and music. What do people typically have issues with in terms of the techs and people who are working or building their guitars?
Oh man, that's a good one. Let's see. In terms of the acoustic guitar, um, it's very often, I've had this instrument made for me and it now needs its first setup because it settled down and it's 8 months to a year later. And that's what I've read on the forums. I should take it to get looked at. But, I'm in Germany and I ordered it from a guy in Hawaii. So where do I go? What do I do? So really you're at the mercy of the community around you. You ask who's got any sort of experience about this sort of thing. Um, It's normally things like the action has risen a little bit. If it's a brand new luthier made guitar, the top has not so much bellied, but just sort of come in and settled, and the thing's getting to realize that it's a musical instrument rather than, 50 different little bits of wood. Um, when I was in retail, the main issues were things like, oh man, there were some extraordinary exchanges, you know. I I've gone. I've put nylon strings on my new Greenfield, and it's buzzing, and the nut slots aren't wide enough, so the strings fall off. I'm like, well, there's your problem. You don't have to look too far
Mhm.
to isolate the root cause of that. Um, on other occasions, finish is an issue very often, or can be, um, because if you're spending a thought-provoking amount of money on a lithium-made instrument, you want it to look pretty damn shiny. And if something comes up like fish eyes in the finish, or a finish crack, for instance, where let's say the wood's Cocobolo or African blackwood or something, the wood itself hasn't cracked, but it's shifted enough to put a couple of white lines in the finish. And next thing you know, you've got some dude losing his mind going, this thing's falling apart. Um, so I guess a lot of that can be solved by education of the client as well, and going, look, these are the sort of circumstances in which you are likely to crack the finish on your guitar. Um, going from extreme heat to extreme cold. I knew of one guy that had underfloor heating and stuck his guitar on a stand on the floor and was surprised when the bridge fell off, or was ripped off rather, and pinged off into the wall behind it. Um, I think finish is so important for the buyer, through or the owner, let's say, throughout the whole process. There's a beautiful way that an instrument acquires a patina when you've had it for long enough, over let's say 10 years or so, and the spruce has yellowed and gone all golden and wonderful. Um, And that there's this sort of slight dying down of the luster that comes from repeated polishings. Um, and very often, I think a finish issue is the first that people will notice because
And do you often do you recommend that people have those repaired or just live with it as the inevitable aging of the instrument?
I never recommend that people live with something that they're unhappy with. And I had a friend who will remain nameless, who I absolutely adore, who put a ding like that big, like 1 mil, 1.1 mil ding in the front of a priceless archtop, and his whole world just fell apart. And he was considering spending, I think, $25,000 to get it sent back by first class, a guy on the plane with the guitar next to him, back to the luthier, complete refinish, steam out the ding, finish it again, and then bring it back home. And it was ridiculous. But sometimes people are very happy to put that amount of money in exchange for their peace of mind. So you never really know. If something's bothering someone, then I always, whatever it is, recommend that they talk to the person most likely to be able to offer some sort of resolution. That could be a luthier, it could be their wife, it could be their children, whoever it is. Have that conversation. Um, it's no good just sort of sitting on it and feeling, upset. I don't know if
Hmm.
that was
Yeah.
that a question from Grace? I've got a chat up here.
Yes. The question is, what are some reasons players switch repair shops and techs?
Oh man, well that's one bad experience will get you out of there immediately. I think you only really get one choice, well, one chance.
Can I
Um,
can I
there's
follow up with that? Are you
Yeah,
What do you think is most likely for them just to move on, or do you think that they'll have an interaction with the repair person first, or the builder first, or whatever? Will they actually have a conversation, or do you think it's more often that they'll just cut their
I think the
losses and
conversation will go outward to whoever they normally talk to about guitars. I think the uh, I've been fairly fortunate that I haven't had to have that sort of conversation about repairs. I've certainly had to have it about barbers over the years. You get one fucking bad haircut. Do you go back? No, of course you don't.
But do you tell the barber like
No,
I'm not
I
coming
sit
back
there
because
and I
this is a bad?
fume
Uh,
and I go, "Fuck you! I'm never coming back."
uh, but you don't
And
actually tell them, right? Because
no,
like I think a lot of repair people, I guess they assume, oh well, I've never had a single complaint, and it's like people don't
yeah,
complain, they
makes you
just
wonder
move
why.
on. Yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that certainly acoustic guitarists tend to be fairly non-confrontational people, especially if we're solo fingerstyle guitarists. The singer-songwriters are another breed altogether. You'll know all about every single issue they've ever had
Well,
within about
they'll write a song about it.
yeah,
So
they'll write a song about it and
yeah.
send it to you. Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, I suspect that what actually happens is word of mouth never filters back to um, to the luthier or the dealer or the barber or the chef in question because let from my own point of view, if I'm working with someone that I really like and there is a mistake or a drop in communication or whatever, yeah, I will work to amend that. But not everyone has that sort of relationship. Sometimes people can feel a genuine level of offense if they feel that you've been careless with an instrument that they love. And I can totally understand that. And I think from that point on, they're just keen to forget it ever happened. And there may be a little element where they're just like, actually, you know what? Fuck it. Just let him do his thing or let her do her thing. I'm going to take my guitar to somewhere else. And I don't want the conversation to turn into recrimination or bad feeling. Maybe there's an element of, I'd be doing them a favor that I don't want to do by coming back to them and saying there's an issue here. You know, um, I don't know. That's conjecture, I guess, on my part. Certainly, when I've come up with a, uh, it happened quite recently. I mean, I got a haircut with the barber um, cut me with a straight razor. It was an accident. It happens. And if he hadn't been an absolute sweetheart, I probably never would have come back. You know, because you got a straight razor around your jugular vein. You don't really want to hear someone with a Turkish accent going, "Oh shit," and then running to get the tissues. It doesn't fill you with confidence. But despite the fact that this dude is Kurdish and I don't speak his language and his English was faltering, we were able to get to the point where there was an understanding that this was a mistake. I was a valued customer. It would never happen again, and it happened simply because of this set of circumstances. His hand had slipped. Fine, you know. I went back there afterwards. I've been back there a couple of times since. It's no big deal if you handle it. uh, then there's the cover up. If he hadn't said anything, if he just left me there, bleeding and gone, well, it wasn't me, you must have bumped your head when you sat down, that would have been a different conversation. So I guess it is, maybe it's a question of empathy, realizing that you are dealing with something that is very precious to somebody, even if it is the most, mass produced Yamaha Pacifica from 1997. There's billions of them out in the world. Um, but, there are many like it, but this one is mine. And there's a human connection, and that must always be respected. People put hours into this. Uh, I always try to instill in fellow staff members a feeling, an appreciation of the fact that anybody who was dedicating hours to pursuing music at whatever level was worthy of respect. So it didn't matter if they couldn't fucking play and they'd spent $100,000 with you that month on instruments that were just going to go through C, F, and G. It doesn't matter. They're being played. They are being loved. Someone is dedicating their time to that guitar, and as such, they get they deserve just as much of your time and your respect as some virtuoso that's going to take it on tour.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I just wanted to read out Grace has a great comment where she said, sounds like communication and transparency can save those nasty feelings that lead to walking away in a lot of cases, like your point earlier about trust and investment with your luthier. So,
Yeah, I
uh,
think so. I
yeah,
think
totally agreed. Um, Michael, I'm curious of your opinion on this. I've always thought about, you know, the violin family of instrument culture versus the guitar culture.
oh yeah.
And the guitar culture, it was really the instrument of for the masses. It was first a mass produced instrument, at least the steel string.
Mm.
Before it was became kind of a handmade instrument,
Yeah,
and
but
they needed to
work.
be widely available and affordable.
Yes.
Um, and I feel like that carried into that idea about the value of the instruments carried into the um, pricing of the servicing of these instruments. Like,
Yeah.
well, I only paid, $500 for this guitar, so I'm not going to pay, $500 to have it repaired.
Yeah.
And yeah, so do you, in your communications with players, and I'm not talking about higher end instruments, but just in general,
Mm.
how do players feel about the pricing of repair work and setups and fretwork? Too
Well,
expensive, right on the money, you know?
I think it's one of those dreaded diamond-shaped business models, isn't it? Where uh, okay, so if you do a fantastically good job, I mean, there are repair people here in the UK who are, spoken about in hushed terms. People like Bill Puplet, for instance, who does Eric Clapton's guitars and Johnny Marr's guitars and, everybody else. And if you go as a civilian to Bill and say, please, can you put a new nut on my 59 Les Paul Burst, he'll go, yes, absolutely. And you won't see that guitar again for about a year and a half because he's busy with everybody else's, but he will get round to it. And then when it's done, it will be utterly perfect, and he'll charge you quite a lot of money, significantly more than if you'd gone down to the equivalent of Guitar Center and had it done. Because there's the trust there. There is, you know, that Bill is going to do a great job because he works for Clout and he works for Johnny Marr and he works for everybody else. And in fact, Bill helped Fender design the Johnny Marr signature Jag, which is why it's as good as it is. But I digress. I think that um, right at the start of a builder or a repairman's career, you have to find your client base, and there are inevitably ways to do that that demand charging less than you might feel your work is worth. As you improve, you will get a. Can you see this? Here we go. So I'm going to sort of give a PowerPoint presentation through the medium of contemporary dance. So this is you right at, or me rather. Let's say I'm a guitar tech. Right at the start of my career, and my client base is growing and growing and growing and growing. However, at this point, it's unsustainable. I've got too many people asking me to do work, and my prices are at such a point that yes, I can just about live, but I've got more work than I have time, right? So at this point, I've got to deliberately strangle supply of the resource that is my time and expertise and bring it back down to a sweet spot where I'm doing ideally as little work as possible in order to allow you to concentrate on one job with the gravitas it deserves and getting paid, you know, what that work actually deserves. You're quite right. If you take your violin, you take your Guarneri or your Strad through to someone, especially in Florence, you'll be paying a huge amount of money for the expertise, um, and the fact that it's a classical instrument, and as such, it demands certain things. Well, so does the guitar. You know, at the end of the day, it is just a wooden box with strings on it. But you're quite right. There is this cultural semantic weight behind it that demands this this level. You know, you can command more money if you are uh, a tech for the classical market. That's always been the case. I suspect the people that make next to nothing are probably the whoever has to set guitars or saxophones or well, no, whoever has to set up musicians for instruments for musicians that are working in an area of music that is traditionally quite, you know, quite low on the economic ladder. So folk guitarists, they're not exactly flinging the cash around in the same way that you know, a concert pianist might be. They don't have the resources in order to keep their instruments up to that standard, to a performance standard. And your point stands that the instrument itself to begin with might not have been a particularly wonderful mandolin or guitar. I don't quite know where I'm going with this. I've confused myself, but it's a very good question.
Well, do you do you find that players, what is their general attitude towards the
It's a necessary evil,
the
I think.
general price of repair? Do they feel like, oh, it's so expensive, it's overpriced, or it's totally reasonable?
I think you can't, once again, you can't put a price on peace of mind. And I mean, I always ask, how much is this going to cost me? I don't just leave an instrument with someone and go, bye, you know, and then
Hmm.
have a shit fit about the bill later. You know, that's never going to work. Um, I think the guitarists that I know that work as professional musicians, they need their instruments up and running. You know, they might have recordings at Abbey Road one day and a short tour the next week. They need it to do what it's supposed to do, and therefore, um, maintenance is part of the cost of doing business. so it's never begrudged. And if you can find somebody that you trust, then that person is literally worth their weight in gold, you know. So um, if it's just somebody who's a hobbyist or a collector or somebody who never considered the fact that guitars need adjusting, then the chances are, let's go back to your putative $500 instrument. If the setup's $100, that's 20% of the initial investment. For what? Just to stop it rattling? Well, maybe I should just buy another guitar. It is a cyclic argument, isn't it? The players that I know, they're happy to hand over the money as long as the results are there. You know, I mean, I always make sure that if I've asked for something to be done on an instrument, that it stays with the tech until it has been done. You know, and there have been not many occasions, but a couple when I've had to go, actually, you know what, this isn't quite what I'd asked for. Let's have another look, and I'll let you know. And I'm quite happy to take 50% of the responsibility for that, and go, look, maybe I wasn't entirely clear in what I was hoping for here. Let me try again, and that's always sorted it out. Uh, it shows levels of trust running both ways, doesn't it? You know, if you can have that conversation and treat somebody as a human being trying to do their best for you, um, treat them with that in mind, then there's an argument that says they're probably going to do a good job. But if you
Yeah.
turn up just being a complete prick and going, right, this is my guitar, treat it like your own children. So great.
All right. What are your thoughts on um, the change in the quality of instruments? You know, since say like the 1980s, it seems like, in my estimation, you know, guitars have gotten measurably better in all
Mhm.
respects.
Yeah.
Um, you know, with an increase in price as well. But
Mhm.
do, is that what's your estimation of that?
Well, the last time I interviewed you, Michael, you said something very wise, which has stayed with me, and I'm going to chuck it back at you. Um, Looking at guitars, especially running into them at guitar shows, luthier shows, the Woodstock show, for instance, that's happening this weekend. Uh, the worst over the past 10 years, the worst guitar at the show is now unrecognizable to how it was 10 years ago. The worst guitar at the show is pretty damn good. And that is a wonderful thing. And by the we, I mean you and I, and whoever else is interested in lithium-made bespoke instruments, although that's not a word I'm particularly happy with. Um, we are 0.1% of 0.1% of the market itself. Uh, I think your observation as far as quality goes still stands. I think you can still get, well, you can, as a beginner, get a preposterously good instrument from Squire or Epiphone or anybody else that just wouldn't have been available, certainly when I was coming up. You know, early 90s, the idea that you could get something that plays as well and sounds as good for a relatively low investment. I mean, I grew up on a Squire Strat that was about fourth hand. It was a Japanese Squire, so it would be worth a fortune now. But I didn't know at the time. Um, yeah, the it's difficult, isn't it? Because there is a law of diminishing returns, but not in the same way that a lot of people understand that to take place. So, for instance, if you're dealing with um, the bigger companies, Gibson, Fender, things like that, up to a certain point, yeah, there's no real uh, improvement over the quality of the instrument itself. It's just different. It's not better, it's different. And you get to choose which one of those two different things you want. I know a lot of people, when they see a high value instrument, get quite upset because they go, well, that's out of my price range. Well, I'm afraid, sweetheart, it wasn't aimed at you. You know, sorry. But there are others out there. What really boils my piss, ladies and gentlemen, though, is something like this. Hang on. You're going to have to edit this bit out.
Are you going to drop your pants? What's going on?
Yeah, we're gonna need a get a black bar up there for this, I think.
What is this?
It's a guitar-shaped
Is that
object.
a Fender? What is
Yes,
that?
it is.
Yeah, yeah.
So, the Fender, I mean, who amongst us is not thrilled to the knobbly bits of a Marauder or the little swoopy bits in a Swinger and the triangular headstock? They're capable of some beautiful designs, don't get me wrong. This quiche of a thing, they want £1,000 for that, ladies and gentlemen. £1,000. Someone's actual money. That's offensive, I'd say. I mean, it's
I I was very tempted to comment on your post about that, but I refrained.
oh, you should, please do.
Okay.
You're very welcome to. I mean, I have to review this
Are they marketing that as a
for
collector?
guitar.com.
Are they
Hmm?
marketed that as a collector's item? What's
Oh,
their
no, no, no.
what's their
Well, that's just it, you see. They're not marketing it as a collector's item, but they are charging about twice what I would pay for the thing, quite
uh-huh.
honestly. So I take offense um, to this instrument in a way that I wouldn't for, say, a Murphy Lab Les Paul. It's marketed at a certain client who is looking for certain things, and I don't feel the ones that I've seen anyway that the Murphy Lab, certainly the I don't play Les Pauls, but the SGs, they're pretty damn good, and I would happily pay what they're asking for if that was the instrument that I was looking for. This, on the other hand, I find extremely offensive for so many reasons. There is a solid spruce top with a floating X brace in it. That'll be fun for whoever tries to get a dental mirror in and repairs that. There is a some sort of floating pickup. I mean, it's on every level, ergonomically, aesthetically, and sonically. That guitar, I don't think it's just a matter of personal taste either. I really find it offensive. So I've now got to write a an objective. I think that's an objective review of it. Other things, that people might expect me to get incensed by. I mean, it's made from carbon fiber. It's one piece. It's got let me turn it on. Here we go.
Looks like that'd make a great mailbox.
Exactly. There we go. It's got a touch screen for the preamp. It's got haptics in it. Right? There's a driver in the back. So when I turned it on just now, if I'd been holding the guitar like this, I would have felt it dunk in my chest like that.
Yeah.
It's the maddest thing. I don't find it offensive at all, but I know that people have really got upset about it over the internet. Here we go, I'll switch it off. Whoop. It's an iPhone with 6 strings, is how they're marketing it. Anyway,
Michael, who are you writing for these?
I'll write for guitar.com
Okay.
for reviews, and I've done somewhere in the region of maybe 150 reviews of guitars and acoustic and electric guitars. I also specialize in reviews of handmade fuzz pedals and amps and that sort of thing. My writing style is being compared to a sort of cross between P.G. Wodehouse, Lester Bangs, and Hunter S. Thompson, only about acoustic guitars. So pick the change out of that. And I hope you enjoy the reviews. I only normally get about 1,000 words maximum, so I can't really stretch out. But yeah, I've asked for 1,000 words on this Fender thing, and we'll see what what happens.
So what on the Fender thing, like, and being offended by things? I mean, is there any pressure to reel that in at all there, or
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can be offended by things on so many different levels, can't you? You can be offended on a socio-political level. That guitar doesn't offend me so much, but if I saw an instrument that had, some sort of
what
a
died in any way?
Dean, yeah, or Dean Flying V with a Confederate flag on the front of the thing, something like that, I'd be like, okay, this is utterly unnecessary. Um, this is not that. There are other things that offend me just on a aesthetic level. Zero frets, uh, Floyd Rose trems, but that's down to personal taste, isn't it? And the fact that every single aspect of the guitar carries its own semantic weight. You know, every single part of this guitar is either considered or it's not. I mean, let's face it. So Fender kick off with this or something like it, and then before you know it, they've gone down some sort of evolutionary black hole. And they didn't even leave the Telecaster alone, did they? I mean, by the time CBS got in touch, this was some sort of wonky carve here, and they had all sorts of weird ass pickups, and there was a there we go. This is the main reason why I'm so upset with this. It's not the main reason, but it's one of the reasons. Look, acoustic guitar. I don't mind a bolt-on neck. Don't mind a bolt-on neck at all. But 3-bolt tilt adjust, like a 74 custom. Are you kidding me? So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, history frowned on that pretty
Yes, because
pretty
it's all
solidly, like the second it came out, I think.
yeah for good reason. I mean, I want to like it because I know that there's gonna be some poor bastard out there who wants to make music with this, and society's gonna let them. And then they could have spent their money and their effort and their intent on something perhaps a bit more inspiring. But you know, so much of this goes back to personal taste, I guess. I have been described as a taste maker. There's nothing I could do to make people want that. You know, I tried to take some sexy pictures, and it just wasn't happening at all. So I'm going to plug it in on tomorrow. In fact, got the studio set up. I'm going to stick some mics in front of it as well. Try the DI. It's got some sort of brand new um, Fishman Fluence pickup in it, which you'll probably be seeing quite a lot of, and it's sort of semi-interesting in that the pickup itself. Don't know how well you can see that. Is does my thing work? Hang on, let's try this. Oh yeah, zoom. Look at that. So right here you've got this. The pickup actually follows the curve of the sound hole, which is sort of almost interesting. What it means in practice, I'm not sure that Fender actually did, decided to do it like that, but in the same way they've got the angled pickup in the Strat, you've now got the bass end and the treble end, a 50 mil closer to the bridge than the mid section, let's say. So does that lead to a sort of a scoop mid sound? Well, I don't particularly care. The answer is no. You get essentially something that sounds like a Fishman Rare Earth, and you've got a tone and a volume. I thought that they might stick some of the acoustasonic stuff in there. I thought there might be, at least one Shinai unpleasant companion fuzz pedal or something in there, but no, it's that's all you get. It's an acoustic thing. Um, there is of course the question: was it marketed at me? Well, no, it wasn't. Who was it marketed at? Well, I guess every influencer that they will have sent one to, that will now be going all over YouTube and Instagram, going, "Hey, this guitar blew my brains out."
Would that guitar offend you as much if it was like a $375 kind of
No,
price? Like
no, probably
because
not.
that's what it looks like. It looks like a
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but they
um,
won $1,000 plus for this thing.
uh, huh.
Yeah, it won't even kiss you first, Mr. Bashkin.
Yes. So yeah, we've been going for about an hour now.
Have we really?
If it, yeah, if
My God.
anybody anybody has any questions, please unmute and
Hmm.
uh, and ask Michael. But while we're waiting for
While
that,
we're waiting for that onslaught, yeah.
yes,
Maybe
I
maybe a
was.
good thing to do is to ask some hypothetical questions about repair.
Yeah, please do.
I had a customer one time. Um, say like the E first string
Hmm.
spacing from the edge of the fingerboard, or let's say like the end of the fret before it bevels. Like it
Yes.
seemed like matter where I put the E first string, like if I cut the guy a nut, like no matter where I put it, he would want it somewhere else. Like, oh, it's too close to the edge. So then I would do it like, further. And he's like, well, I can't, it doesn't have enough spread now. Like, in those circumstances, if somebody, because I have a personal preference as a
Mm.
repair person on where I think the E first should go on a nut. And if somebody is like, I wish it was a little bit more this way or a little bit more that way, and it leads to cutting a new nut, do you think that's something the repair person should eat, or is it something that maybe the onus is a little bit more on the consumer end because they didn't communicate, they had or they guessed that they maybe had a preference and they didn't front load the conversation with their or the
Yeah, I mean, there are ways to protect yourself in your um, in your price list from situations like that. So you could say within this setup, there's an initial consultation fee or something like that, which would give you a little bit of a buffer, and that would be particularly useful if this is the first time you're seeing this client. You know, second time you've established a bit of trust. Third time, great. So the first time around, maybe build something like that in. Um, then there's also the fact that does the client understand that their preference is going to change as they move their fretting hand along the neck itself? Does the client understand the relationship that the hand muscles, the flexor and extensor muscles, actually play in, not just in theory, but in the way that they play? Do they understand the uh, the fact that the string is not always going to be parallel to the edge of the fret, to the edge of the neck, rather? You know, there may be, depending on string spacing at the bridge and at the nut, there may be a widening gap between the string and the edge of the fingerboard. Do they understand that their technique is going to dictate whether or not let me try this again. Hemispheric, fucking hell. What do you call those things? Hemispheric,
hemispherical.
Yes.
those ones. Are they a good idea for you? They look gorgeous, but they're not a great idea for everybody, because they can cause a little bit of a slip. If someone's got a heavy flexor um, action on their left hand, they can pull down a little bit of vibrato, suddenly turns into the string, woo, whipping off the end of the fret. So, um, yeah, I mean, with that hypothetical, you have to be able to ask those questions before anything begins, and establish just how educated the client is. Say, right, this is what's happening. This is the problem. These are the variables, and this is what I can do. But I need you to isolate which of these things you want me to do. From that point, it's their choice, right? They may turn around and go, well, whatever you think is best. You have to be a little bit disciplined at that point and go, no, it's not my guitar. This is your instrument. And from that point, they go, right, okay, well, either let me sit with it for a little longer and tell you what I think. Great. Sit him in the corner. Well, this can be really helpful anyway. Before, look, I know it's not practical always, but if you can spend 10 minutes with someone who's got a problem with their instrument, just listening to them play, you will learn so much. And if you can't, ask them for a video of themselves playing that guitar that you can look at in detail. Because I know if you're a tech in a busy shop, you're just going to get the instrument with a list of requirements and you're going to do your job to the best of your abilities. But 5 to 10 minutes of watching them actually play the thing and seeing how they interact with it is going to be absolutely golden. And especially if you've got someone who believes that their own needs as an instrumentalist are so refined that they are able to judge, 2 or 3 thou either way on the top E string, then that merits the kind of observation in detail that I'm describing.
Thank you.
Michael, what's
Michael,
your?
oh, my bad.
Oh, please go ahead, Joel.
Oh, hey, Michael,
Aaron,
how
is
you
that
doing?
you, man?
Well, yeah, hiding here.
Oh shit, dude!
How you
I hadn't
doing?
realized. I'm very well. How are you?
Um, I'm hanging in there. Thank you.
Good, good. I'm delighted to hear it.
Um, two things you said. One about like video of somebody playing.
Mm,
I rely more on that more than anything that anybody actually says because they I don't think people are that cognizant of what they're doing,
mhm.
especially when they get to a certain point. They just play, you know. Um, but I watch hours of video of some clients just to get an idea. My experience with uh, very talented clients and maybe sort of amateur clients seems almost opposite in some ways. Um, like the virtuoso kind of people seem to be able to play on anything, no matter
Mm,
how it's set up, no matter what. And don't don't really give me a hard time about how something's set up one way or another, even if threats are high or what it seems to be maybe the well-intentioned but amateur players
yeah.
who are very critical of how something is set up and
Mhm.
probably don't exactly know how they want something set up or how it needs to play for them. Um, and I don't know that I'm the person to explain it to them, but they probably need it. They probably need a good teacher. Is what it is.
Joel, you're the
Uh,
person to explain it to my customers, if that makes you feel any better.
I
but
think those are some very good points, Joel. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when it comes to someone like Jared, for instance, yeah, he can play his ass off on anything you hand to him, and he's not going to complain because let's face it, sometimes we accept idiosyncrasies in certain instruments, um, and certainly as players, it's up to us to decide whether or not we are prepared to live with those idiosyncrasies. I have one electric guitar in particular. And this isn't something that I would do with an acoustic ever. I need my acoustics to be immediate and quite friendly. I have a Tressart Steelcaster Deluxe that I'm firmly convinced fucking hates me. Um, Here we go. It sounds incredible. Everything I've plugged it into, every track I've recorded with it, sounds beautiful. But I don't think it likes me. It just sort of, I don't know. It's not that I have to drag something out of it. It just doesn't feel friendly to play to start with. It's not a comfortable squeeze for me, because every player is also battling their own anatomy in terms of their relationship with the guitar. We're not all the same size, and yet all our dreadnoughts, all our OMs, all our double O's, they're all the same size. All our Telecasters are all the same size. This guitar, from the ergonomic point of view, does not suit me to the point where some days I'm just like, actually, you know what? I will move it on for something else. And then I plug it in and I record something with it, and it just sounds so damn good and so effortless in the way that it fits in a mix, and effortless in the way that it gives me immediate high quality results, that I'm just like, yeah, it's a great tool from that point of view. It's a bitch to play, and I've had it set up several times, and it's not like the frets are sprouting. The action is slinky. It's, in fact, when it was set up, I got exactly what I asked for. But the ease of use does not come from the playing of the instrument. It's actually quite difficult for me to nail a take on it. I don't know why. It's not about the numbers. It's not about the dimensions. So the ease of use comes from after, almost post-production. I know that I've only got to nail one great take, and in terms of EQ, in terms of texture, in terms of dynamic range, the instrument will take care of itself. So I still keep it, and it's a learning process. And even now, just with the thing sitting on my thigh, it feels a lot less friendly than every other guitar I own. But I'm prepared to make that compromise in the case of this one instrument. That's it. Put it back now.
Fair enough.
I know I'm not alone in that. You had another point, Joel.
No, not beyond that. Just was curious what your take had been. But thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, my man. Absolute pleasure. Lovely to see you. Well, hear
And you.
you. What else can I help with while I'm here, gentlemen? I mean, it is it's 12 minutes past 10 in the UK. So
If you gotta go, you gotta go.
no,
We're
it's not that
just
I have to
gonna.
go. I'm just going to get more erratic and unhinged
Oh, that's
as I
good.
get more and more. Yeah, exactly. So,
All
sleep
right.
deprivation, as Michael well knows, leads to all sorts of interesting things. Thankfully, I'm at the right altitude, so I'm not going to keel over. We've got something in
This
from Grace here, I see.
Yes, question from Grace. So what will
Well,
make you break up with an instrument?
well, that's just it. I'm on the cusp with this Trissart. Believe me, there's days when I'm just like, actually, you're off, and there's other days when, as I say, that nothing else will do. Um, it's not something I've had to do recently, thankfully. Financial insecurity is always there as a musician, and very often we see the guitars that we own as investments that could be as assets that could be liquidated when necessary. As such, uh, you're most likely, like anything, sell your most sellable things first. Well, thankfully, that's not the position here, like it has been in my past when I was coming up. Um, so the guitars that have got through the door have done so because at some point I've fallen in love with them, and they stay with me because I have made music with them that means a lot to me. Uh, so everything that I've sold in the past has been due to just financial necessity at the time. Um, I can't think of anything that I've bought and given straight back. No, it hasn't happened, thankfully.
I think you're going to do that with that Fender.
Oh, well, thankfully, I didn't pay any money for this. They sent it
Ah,
to me. I'll pay them to take it back quite happily.
all right. uh, Michael, we once had a conversation where we were talking about how, especially with acoustic guitars, new acoustic guitars, they're really just at the beginning of a process of developing their
Yeah.
tone, and how often a buyer or the owner won't really give the guitar a chance in terms of
Yeah, yeah.
to open up and to get used to it and to play it in. So with people that you were talking to about instruments, or for a builder or even a repair person, what would the conversation look like in terms of telling somebody, look, when you get this guitar, it's going to be like this, but it's not going to stay like this, and you need
Sure.
to, put the time in.
Well, I think it's all about managing expectations, and that goes back to clear communication. So managing expectations is one of the most important things you can do with anybody whose time you value. Uh, I think I've certainly told everybody that's bought a guitar from me, a brand new guitar, that this is the best it's ever going to look and the worst it's ever going to sound, and I stand by that. You know, from that point on, it depends what the expectations are. If it is a $300 Yamaha, well, okay, let's go back a little bit. This idea of guitars opening up, this is controversial. You can go to any guitar forum and ask, do guitars open up over time? And some people will say, oh God, yeah. And others will go, no, absolutely not. They're the same, throughout their entire lifespan. And there are so many different variables at play. Yes, your $300 Yamaha probably does sound the same as when you bought it in 1982. Your 90s Martin may have changed a bit. Your 2004 Matsuda might be night and day from how it was to begin with. Um, I think the amount of change that you're going to see in a guitar is mostly predicated by how uh, lightly it was made in the first place, how responsive and how musical it is. And to start with, um, a lithium-made instrument can feel a little bit raw, a little bit uh, wild, because it doesn't know it's a guitar yet. Um, However, the uh, the change that you will experience is because ownership, we're talking decades here, ideally. The changes that you'll experience in the first decade will be really quite marked. And I haven't owned a guitar for 2 decades yet. My my longest I think is 11 years. So I'm yet to see what's going to be happening in the second decade with one instrument. Um, in terms of the guitar's voice changing, I would recommend that no one ever buys a guitar in the hopes that it's going to change, um, because that way lies absolute madness. And I know there there are communities of people who enjoy sitting around in circles and talking about things that they love. Some of them talk about wine, some of them talk about cigars, some of them talk about guitars, or whiskies. And the conversation is very often very similar. It's great now, but what's it going to be like in 5 or 10 years? And then you go, oh, isn't that wonderful? And then you think, well, in each of these things, in cigars, in guitars, in wine, in whiskies, there are historical milestones. And you go, well, imagine if we could transport a Martin OM from 1938 to the present day, absolutely new. What would it have sounded like? Would it be different to a brand new OM by someone who built in the Martin style, say Bourgeois or Collings or whoever it happens to be, TJ Thompson? Or would it be exactly the same? And what's a Costal guitar going to sound like in 80 years' time? I'm never going to know. I don't think so. I'm fucking surprised if I do. So, so much of this is in the realms of hypothesis. But wherever people congregate to talk about things that they love, that question is very, very common. What's it going to be like in 5 years? What's it going to be like in 10 years? The chances are it's going to be very similar, but it may have smoothed off. That's just as true of guitars as it is of cigars or wine or brandy or whatever else it is that you happen to collect. There will be a period of maturation, and there will be a bell curve to that, where where the effects of that maturing process are more readily discernible, if you see what I mean. And then they will tail off, and only the connoisseur will be able to truly tell. Like only some. Oh, I can tell by with a blindfold on the difference between a 38 and a 39 OM. Can you bollocks? But I'm not going to challenge it because I've never been in the same room. So yeah, did that come anywhere near answering your question?
Yeah, yeah. It's I think in terms of guitars changing over time, it's hard to separate opinion from fact.
Of course it is, and well, that's the whole thing with all of this, and that's what really makes the community and the life that we live as frustrating as it is wonderful. We do not have a vocabulary for an experience that we haven't shared. So you and I went, and I still remember this. We went for breakfast, and I had this eggs Benedict thing that had like pork belly on it and chili, and had an espresso, and it was one of the best breakfasts I've ever had. Although since we last met, I have quit caffeine, so this is
Mm.
chamomile. Um, However, I can try and explain the epic nuances of that breakfast to people who weren't there. You're the only person on this earth who truly understands, Michael, what I'm talking about. It's the same thing. If you go on any forum and someone will post, "What's the most expensive guitar in the world?" and someone will go, "Well, Irvin Samochi starts at, well, 60K or whatever it is," and then someone immediately goes, "Well, I can't imagine a 60K guitar being any better than my Loudon or my Collings or my whatever that is Fender thing." But that's the part of the sentence that's doing all the heavy lifting. I can't imagine. So until you get to the point where you've got personal experience, hands-on experience with this sort of thing, it becomes some sort of nebulous ideal. I remember what I was like before I heard a 1930s OM, and I imagined, oh, what do they sound like? What does it feel like to play one of these? And then I had that experience, and I realized that, yeah, it's a great sounding guitar, but it's not for me. It doesn't have to be. It's still a great instrument, but it's not something that I would choose. I've been very fortunate to play 1959 Les Paul Bursts that are great instruments, but they're not for me. I don't lay awake at night coveting that or a 58V or something, going, oh my God, I wish. There are 4 or 5 guitars out there with that I would comfortably live a lifetime with. George Gruen has got a Lawson Brothers Dreadnought from the 40s that absolutely blew my brains out, but it's part of his private collection.
I know the
He's
guitar
also
you're
got
talking about right
a,
there.
yeah,
That guitar is really special.
it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's that. There is John Monteleone has got this his own personal instrument. It's called Scarface. It's an archtop with an oval hole in it. That's glorious. It's not for sale either. These guitars are dotted around the world, and I know that they exist, and I know that they'll never be mine, but I know that I could quite happily spend a lifetime with them. But I don't feel the need to covet them, if you see what I mean. So, yeah, it's all down to personality and what your expectations are and what your needs are as a player. And the better you can isolate those and communicate those, then the better an experience you're going to have. Let's face it, the first time you go into a guitar shop, it's entirely a blank canvas, especially if you've never played in your life. And you ask the dude or dudette, who's obviously some hip person who understands music and taste, and you say, right, I want to sound like the Stiff Little Fingers, or I want to sound like that Nirvana Unplugged album. I'm showing my grunge credentials now. I want to sound like anything. And you're relying on somebody to hand you a musical instrument that will allow you to do that, to be a baseline in order to produce that kind of sound. I want to sound like Woody Guthrie or Wes Montgomery or other people beginning with W. You're relying upon somebody to hand you your Excalibur in order to do that. Uh, and I think that we often, because as Michael said earlier, the guitar has been traditionally a blue collar mass produced instrument, we often assume that a guitar will suit everybody. And we often assume that a great guitar must suit everybody. And that's simply not the case. There we go.
All right. Any other questions for Michael?
I've got a question.
Hmm.
Am I here? Yeah, I'm on here. Um, what well, I don't know how to really to word this, but as far as sound of how the guitar sounds, we all know that that's something we strive for. But what percentage, from a guitar buyer's perspective, is aesthetics?
Oh man, the aesthetics are vital. I don't want to. I don't want to deal in percentages, and I know why you'd phrase the question that way. but I think it all matters all the time. You know, and that's what makes it so difficult because uh, for us as players, going back to our little groups of people discussing things that we love, we have these cyclic conversations. Is the soundboard 80% of the sound and the back is 20%, but then you've got nothing left for the sides. So how does it, and we go round and round and round, and we never think of talking to someone like you who actually knows what's going on. So in terms of the aesthetic, yeah, it is vital because, okay, I can only speak from my own personal experience. To me, a guitar has to look beautiful because that illustrates to me the intent with which it was made. So I can look at a guitar by Michiru Matsuda or Mike Bashkin or Jason Costel or Ken Parker, and I know that every single millimeter of that guitar from stem to stern was considered, and the intent that went behind it was that of a craftsman who knew that they were completely in control of their materials and their technique. And there may have been bits that they allowed to just leave and let nature speak. Michi Matsuda's got a guitar with him at the Woodstock show, which I suggest you check out on his Instagram. It's utterly crazy, like Michi's work often is, but half of the soundboard is spruce, the other half is redwood. Okay, we've seen that done before. The spruce bit has got a knot like yay big in it. It's a complete, absolute beautiful fuck you to the to the. I mean, it really is. It's just gorgeous in the way that he's done it. To the Tonewood Hounds,
Mhm.
this thing is just delicious. And Michi's sound may not be to everybody's taste. I find it personally very beautiful. Um, so in terms of intent, yeah, guitar's got to look beautiful to me. Beauty, very much, as we know, is in the eye of the beholder. Certain things that I find beautiful, I know for a fact other people don't. So Irvin Samoji's work, I don't know how familiar you are with Irvin's work, but his aesthetic is kind of gothic, slightly challenging. If all you've lived around are Loudons and Taylors and stuff like that, suddenly you see this bizarre looking thing and it costs a lot of money. Well, I have learnt to associate those aesthetics with a certain response and a certain sound and a certain playing experience in the same way that I've learned to associate other perhaps more challenging designs. One of my favorite electric guitars is Uli Teufel's Birdfish. I don't know if you've seen that. It's literally two steel sculptures. One is a bird, one is a fish, and then there are two bars of wood uniting the two, and a sort of a rail, and you can stick how many pickups you want on it, and it's plated in rhodium like a Rolex, and it's headless, and it's the craziest thing. I mean, it feels and sounds like a really great Strat. You can close your eyes, and all the touch points. The pickups are where you'd expect, selector switches where you'd expect, the knobs are where you'd expect. They're a different shape, but they're kind of where you'd expect. And the touch point for your right arm and your left arm, yeah, it feels like a really great electric guitar. And then you look down, I guess it's like free climbing, isn't it? Don't look down and you'll be fine. As soon as you do, you're like, this thing is too crazy to play. Um, I know that it's divisive. I know that Uli's work, Michi's work, Irvin's work, their aesthetic is part of an intent. And I think this is something that Michael and I have spoken about in previous interviews. Um, the intent also belies the personality of the craftsperson, and as such, um, a lot of people who are insecure in the value of their own work will attempt to adopt techniques and visual semantic meaning in order to bolster the perceived value of their own work. So you'll see Matsuda style concentric circles or Samoji style interrupted rosettes by people who have never studied with either luthier, who've never even seen one of their guitars before, let alone heard one in the same room, but they kind of like the fact that it looks pretty. I am all for people experimenting. I'm all for people working out how something is done, but that's a very different thing to putting it on your own work. You know, we have signifiers in the world of the lithium-aid acoustic guitar, of the headstock, the bridge, the label, and the shape of the design itself. Right, those are all pretty damn close to proprietary, and as such, if you start appropriate and the rosette, if you start appropriating little bits from other people that you have no right to, and by right I mean you've studied with that person, or you've apprenticed with that person, then there will be a question mark over the integrity of that choice as far as I'm concerned. It may be beautiful, but I'm yet to see an interpretation of a Matsuda rosette that is as beautiful as what Michi does. I'm yet to see the same thing of somebody trying to get some of Irvin. I mean, you'll have seen a load of acoustic guitars in the past 10 years, ebony bindings with white purflings and sort of square geometric stuff. That all comes from Irvin and then his and his disciples, apprentices. It's the same thing, really,
Yeah.
over the years. And there are people that have had a direct link and can, because to me, those aesthetics mean that I can expect a certain response and a certain sound from that guitar. And if I don't find it because it doesn't exist because the link is not there, I find that it's disappointing. It's all about intent when it comes to aesthetics. It doesn't matter until it does, and it always matters, all of it. And I know that's kind of confusing and kind of zen, but that's the only way I've been able to reconcile it. I saw a guitar recently from a guy, Howard Fung, who is apprenticing with Raymond Kraut in Tucson, Arizona. And he's put some beautiful carvings in there, very much, an Irvin, Leo Buendia kind of vibe. That these carvings, and the fact that he's also used a spruce headstock veneer, which is just gorgeous.
Mm.
It means that it's going to yellow and age in the same way as the soundboard. So it's going to go golden and then it's going to go kind of orange, but it's a soft wood. So it's going to get the dings and the knocks and the lines in the same way as the soundboard itself. I find that kind of poetic. I find that really kind of moving. It's not the sort of thing you're going to find on a mass-produced Yamaha. The aesthetic intent and skill that's gone into that guitar is completely inappropriate in terms of a vintage Martin or a Gibson B25 from 1967. So each instrument needs to be appreciated for what it is. There are certain instruments that I find devastatingly ugly, but I know that other people love them, and that's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but there's nothing I can do about it, And if we all loved the same guitar, then we'd have a slot machine, and there'd be a big queue, and you'd put in your, $1,000 exactly, and it would pop out of the bottom, and we'd all be the same. So yeah, it all matters. The aesthetics, the sonics, and the ergonomics all matter in equal measure, um, except for when they don't.
Ergonomics, you mean like the armrest and stuff like that? Are you a fan?
Well, the armrest, but more just how it feels. You
Hmm.
know, like my previous example of that Trissard guitar is a sensational instrument. It's not my only electric guitar. If it was, then I'd have sold it. It's used for certain things where nothing else will do. Um, and a lot of people say the most important thing of a guitar is how it sounds. That's simply not true. I wish it was. I wish we lived in a world where that was the truth. But the most important thing, if we have to establish a hierarchy, if we have to triage this, it's how it's going to feel. Because otherwise, if you are killing yourself in order to make a sound with this instrument, then it's not going to be in your life for very long or at regular intervals. That Trissart, I play it once every 2 months or so. That's not how I normally treat my guitars. Um, there's also the fact that if I look at I hate to, I'm not picking on you, Michael, I promise, but if I look at a Bashkin guitar, from any angle, that thing is gorgeous. Any angle. 360 rotate it. It is, the line is beautiful, and the way that it's been executed is beautiful because he cares. He loves what he does. And I can feel that before I've even played it. I can feel it when I see one of Michael's guitars online or on a stand at the other side of the room. You just there's something about them. There's a vibration about the visuals, and I can tell when an instrument is slightly heavily built, or when there's an imbalance. When you look at a poster and the fonts are all wrong. Well, the same thing is true when it comes to weight of line in purfling, or in binding, or in a an inlay. For instance, I got an email recently from a guy saying, "Hey, I've made some guitars. I'd like you to check them out." And they looked kind of okay, but he'd put so much effort into an inlay that just hadn't worked. It wasn't that it was poorly executed; it was, but the inlay itself was kind of imbalanced and unlovely. And even if Jimmy Wingate had done it, it would have sucked. Because the design, as it was, Jimmy probably would have turned it into something gorgeous because that's what she does. But um, there's the aesthetics. Every aspect, as far as I'm concerned, every aspect of an instrument has to inspire me. So I need instruments on these racks that I can't walk past. That I have to just excuse me, have to reach for and just go, yeah, it's gorgeous, and the intent behind its creation is palpable, and therefore I will use a similar intent in the way that I use this instrument, the way that I execute the music that I'm about to write or play or record. I find that very inspiring. Luthiers, I've said this before, luthiers are my superheroes. I don't know how you do it. Um, Guitarists, I can sort of figure it out and go, yeah, I can understand how they did that. But to get bits of wood and turn them into things that sing is beyond my ken. I just cannot fathom how it's possible. So yeah, uh, it needs to inspire the hell out of me, and the aesthetics is one way of doing it. I hope that
You
helps.
word things so eloquently.
Oh, it just sounds that way. We can get away with so much with a British accent.
All right. Any other comments before we questions?
Well,
Um,
I'd like to
I'm,
say,
I just want to note that I do think you totally sidestepped the whole mushy peas thing.
well, I know, as I said, this is something we have. This has to be done face to face. You can't just introduce mushy peas to a man at long distance. This is a sort
Yeah.
of, we we wouldn't have got mushy peas at the Duck and Waffle. We what I need you to do is I can either fly into Colorado with a pot of them, although I can't really vouch for their longevity, or you come
I don't
over.
think they'd let you through customs with that, personally.
You're probably right, actually. Well, you fear what you don't understand. And it's not that I'm on some sort of personal drive to get mushy peas accepted around the world, but you are missing out. But at the same time, I've seen what passes for fish and chips in Colorado, so yeah,
Yeah, fair enough. Fair
the whole
enough.
thing needs tearing down and rebuilding from the ground upwards. But I mean, basically, guys, from my part, thank you very much for having me. You can
Yeah.
find me if you haven't already on YouTube and Instagram. YouTube is a lot of fun, but I don't tend to have that much interaction with my audience. Instagram, I'm a lot more immediate with. If you need me for anything, if you want some advice or whatever, then please do DM me. Or get in touch over my website at michaelwattsguitar.com. Yeah, as I say, I'm here. I may be able to help, I may not, but I'm more than happy to try. I didn't know that this existed, that this group existed. I was absolutely thrilled to at the thought that you've got this community online where you're able to share knowledge and experience, and I found that really, really special. So I'm just delighted this does exist, and I'm very happy to have been invited this evening.
Cool. Can everybody unmute and tell Michael, thank you for taking the time and hanging out with us. I'm very thankful.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Mike.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.
Michael.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you,
discussion.
Michaels.
And
Michael and
Thank you,
Michael.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, sorry if it got a bit sweary. I mean, I was told it.
no. Swearing's fine.
Okay, good.
Swearing's fine within reason.
Within reason.
You got to get it, and with the British accent, it barely registers. It sounds so.
Oh,
fancy.
you're quite right. Well, guys, it's been an absolute joy. We're nudging 11 p.m. and I need to find out what happened in the rugby.
Yeah, man.
So I'm going to love you and leave you.
All right.
As I say, stay in touch, and if there's anything I can possibly help with in the future, don't hesitate to let me know.
Sounds good.